Hi everyone, Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and get ready for a big video right now. We are going over the pre-entries for the 14 races in this year's 2024 Breeders' Cup taking place at Del Mar next Friday and Saturday. But before we get to that, make sure to press that like button on the NYRA Bets YouTube channel and make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. Subscribing is completely free of cost. It just notifies you when new videos drop, and we have a lot of Breeders' Cup content for you. In addition to this, we have trainer-specific videos. We have Breeders' Cup Classic Contenders videos that are going to be coming. We have top 5 videos. Oh, by the way, we also have full card analysis for this Saturday at Belmont at the Big A, as well as stakes preview videos for this Saturday at Keeneland. So we got you covered for racing now, and we got you covered for racing next week on the biggest weekend in the sport. All right, well, listen. Let's get into the Breeders' Cup and the pre-entries. And I'll be honest, if I'm jumping through the screen, I'm sorry, but it's not quite like Christmas morning, but it's pretty darn close to it just because now suddenly it's all becoming very real. You start to see what the fields are going to look like. And I'm not going to bury the lead. We're going to kick things off right away and talk about the Breeders' Cup Classic because I think there's a really big piece of information in this, and that is next. The absolutely dominant dirt marathon horse that people, self-included, have wanted to see run the 1.25 mile distance, go up against the best. Well, folks, you're going to get your wish. He's going to go to the Breeders' Cup Classic rather than the Breeders' Cup Turf. There was some thought that he would go to the turf. He used to run on the turf prior to having this new career as a dirt marathoner. And so he's capable of handling the turf. And there was some consideration. The turf race, of course, is 1.5 miles. That's his MO in terms of distance. But he's probably better on the dirt in terms of a surface. So he's going to take the cut back to 1.25 miles, run against the big boys here. I'm excited to see it. Will he win? I don't know. If he does, you might see me run out on the track and give him a big hug right after the race is over. But it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it adds a little bit of spice to this year's Breeders' Cup Classic, which already had plenty of great storylines. So looking over the pre-entries, 14 here, and Arthur's Ride for Bill Mott, a horse that won the Whitney, faded in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, and may be a little distance limited when pressed on the front end. The question is, who's going to press him among this field? Horse like City of Troy coming over, trying dirt for the first time, usually is a horse that has good early speed. You saw that last time out in the Juvenile International. I know it was on the turf, but went straight to the front and took him gate to wire, basically. So that's a horse that has very good early speed. Dermasotogake, when he runs his best races, typically is sitting in a very tracking, stalking, and forward position. Fierceness. You know Johnny Velasquez is going to try to get him out, get him in the clear, and get him up front. Doesn't need to sit first necessarily, but is going to want to be close. Forever Young, if he can clean up those gate issues that he had, even in the Japan Dirt Classic, which he won as a prep for this Breeders' Cup Classic, still, you wonder if the gate issues might haunt him depending on post position. We'll have to see what that is on Monday. But he's a horse that wants to be forward. Highland Falls, if you remember that ride that Flavian Pratt gave him. Now, Flavian Pratt's not going to be aboard. I've seen reports that Luis Saez is going to be riding Highland Falls. If that's the case, Isaiah is going to try to replicate that ride, basically hounding Arthur's Ride as he did in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. And interesting to see how forward he wants to sit. You have Newgate, who likes to usually sit a little bit further back. He likes to kind of track. And in this group might actually find himself sitting 5th or 6th. As I said, next, the Axeman, Luan Machado, the jockey, usually gets him sitting 1st or 2nd in a race. And then just kind of continues to just kind of gain on the field and then eventually just kind of pull away. It's interesting to know what his running style is. And I say that just because he's rarely been asked for his best. So, I know he's a little bit of a one-paced horse in some regards, and usually that's actually pretty good for marathoners, but there is a question of kind of what is his running style going to be successful here. He's going to have to sit relatively close to the pace, but he might not want to sit too close to the pace, only because that could really burn him up going that 1.25 mile distance and going a little bit faster. Horse that's going to be coming from the opposite side of the spectrum, Senor Buscador, a horse that my dad loves. Shout out to my dad. And he's a horse that gets better with distance. And the thing about Senior Buscador, he likes pace. If there's a lot of pace, he's going to make his run. I think he's better around one turn. This is ultimately around two turns. We'll see. And I obviously won the Saudi Cup this year, so is capable of winning big races. But if you remember that Saudi Cup, one turn, mile and an eighth. So it's an unusual configuration. He really excelled at that. Sierra Leone, going to be coming from the back, just like Senior Buscador. Skippy Longstocking, a horse that has good early speed, doesn't need the lead. Look for that horse to track the pace. Tapit Trice coming from off the pace. Ushpa Tesoro coming from off the pace. So it's an interesting race because Arthur's Ride's probably the only horse in this field that I look at it and I go, that horse needs the lead. Everyone else, even Fierceness, doesn't need the lead. Some of them need to be close. Some of them need to be sitting second or third, but they don't need the lead. And that's going to make for an interesting dynamic. Post position, I think, is going to be so critical here. I'll tell you two horses that I think is going to be really important for. One is Tapit Trice. If Tapit Trice draws to the inside, he's a toss. If he draws to the outside, I think he's an interesting horse at a big price. Do I think he can win? Maybe not, but I think he could run up into something. Absolutely. The key, though, is he's got to be on the outside. He's got that big loping frame, and he's just got to be in the clear. That's when he runs his best, when he has that more outside trip and can kind of get out in the clear and just get comfortable. He's never been a particularly athletic horse, so he's a little bit lumbering, and it takes him a while to maneuver around. That's a horse that I think is post-position compromise. Fierceness, another one. If he draws inside, he's going to need to have to break really well. That might force his hand to go straight to the front under Johnny Velasquez. That's going to be an interesting tell. If he draws further outside, well, now you can replicate that Jim Dandy trip. You can replicate the Travers trip. You can sit that kind of tracking trip if you draw a little further out. So it will be interesting to see kind of how all of this happens. I do think a horse like Forever Young would benefit from probably a middle to out post position just because of some of his gait issues. I think if you have those gait issues and you're stuck on the inside, you could get shuffled back real fast, depending on who's immediately to your outside. So I think it might be a little bit kinder to be a little further out, just so that if you do have an initial stumble or just a half step slow, you can still kind of get positioned somewhere and you might not be boxed in so much. So listen, this classic field is going to be amazing. I'm going to have written analysis up on NYRA Bets. I'm going to have plenty of previews. We're going to have horse by horse contender analysis for this. This is an exciting race, though, and I think it's made exciting because it is an international race. We hold the World Series in baseball. Is it a World Series? Well, we got a team in Toronto. Okay, sure. Is it the best in the world? Well, maybe. We like to often proclaim things the best in the world. This feels like an international championship. I mean, usually the turf is the race that feels like the international championship. This now feels like the international championship. You got City of Troy trying the dirt for the first time, the son of Justify, 6 for 7, career winning. I know the lads at Ballydoyle, the lads that consult Aidan O'Brien are very high on him, very excited about the way his training's been going. Son of Justify, should be able to take to the dirt, has great early speed. That makes it fun. Then you got the 3 Japanese horses, Derma, Forever Young, and Ushpa. You got those 3. And they're all 3 very unique horses. Forever Young is probably the most naturally talented. Derma Sotogake ran second in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year after not having run for 6 months. He's a quirky horse. Ushpa Tesoro has won the Saudi Cup before. It came in second by just a nose to Senior Buscador this year. As a super talented horse that'll make his run late, but is getting a little bit older. But all those horses are so interesting. Then you add Next to the mix. This is a fun race. And oh, by the way, you got a Bob Baffert horse. Don't forget about Bobby B. Bob Baffert and Newgate. That horse is sitting on an effort, I have a feeling. That horse is going to, I have a feeling, get lost on the board. I'm just going to tell you, Newgate, do not be surprised if that horse hits the trifecta at all. I think that horse is sitting on a big effort. Remember, finished third by about a short head in the California Crown to National Treasure and Subsanador. More on National Treasure later. And that is a horse that second back could run a really big race for Baffert, who does not have many horses in this Breeders' Cup field, as you will see as we go through it. So Listen, Breeders' Cup Classic, let's go. Let's get excited about this. This is what it's all about, folks. If you're not excited about this one, check your pulse, go to your doctor, make sure you're on all your proper medication, because this is a race that gets you excited for racing. Now, let's start at the beginning. We went straight to the end. Well, not quite the end, because remember, the Breeders' Cup Classic this year, because of television and it being on the West Coast, is not going to be the last race. So we didn't start quite at the end. But let's go to the beginning now, and we'll go through each of these fields. Now, I'm not going to go deep diving into handicapping in each of them, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some major contenders, some horses to consider, and some interesting decisions that were made in terms of where to enter different horses and first and second preferences, etc. Okay? So let's go into the pre-entries for the Juvenile Turf Sprint. And this is an interesting race, and I say that because you have a lot of European horses coming over. And you have a really nice horse in Asterius for Archie Watson right at the top of the list, coming off a Group 2 win and a Group 3 win over in England and France. So this is a horse that's got some pretty serious ability. Won a stakes race as well, four races back. And, this one is, like I said, a very nice horse, and has shown a lot of ability to win these 5 furlong sprints over there. Now, remember, one of the major distinctions between European racing and North American racing, 5 furlong sprints over there, mostly straight, 5 furlong sprints here around a turn. So there is some distinction there. And sometimes, depending on the horse and depending on how they are trained, sometimes European horses will have a little bit of trouble adjusting to going around a turn for the first time, as opposed to just running in a straight line where speed is really paramount. So that's, like I said, a pretty serious horse you start right off with in Artorias. Arizona Blaze for Aidan Murray, another horse that has some nice efforts. Doesn't have a lot of wins, does have a Group 3 victory going back earlier this spring, but has largely kind of been hitting the board and running against some really nice competition. Shareholder and Whistlejacket, who we will talk about here momentarily. A couple of things to note, I will say. Calandine and Mentee. Those two, I have an asterisk next to both of their names. Why? Because this is their second choice. They would rather, their first preference is to be in the Juvenile Turf. So we will see how that all plays out. So those two horses may not end up in this race. To be honest, it's a little puzzling when it comes to Mentee. I say that because I don't think Mentee wants 2 turns. I don't think Mentee wants distance. Now, you can get a little bit more distance out of a horse when you put him on the turf. That generally is true. But, and he looked strong, winning that futurity last time out. But, I just have a hard time forgetting how badly he faded at 7 furlongs in the hopeful. And I just think, quite frankly, that the 5 furlong sprint kind of fits him perfectly. So I'm a little surprised that they're trying to go to a 2-turn turf race as their top preference. They may very well end up in this race. And if so, I think that could be the best of the situation. So Mentee, though, is probably your top horse in terms of a name. But Governor Sam, got to mention Governor Sam for George Weaver. This is probably certainly the most accomplished turf sprinter that we have in North America in terms of 4 for 5 winning, 3 consecutive stakes race victories in the Tyro and the Rosies and in the Indian Summer, winning over 3 different turf tracks and turf courses, and actually winning over 4 overall. One at Saratoga, Monmouth, Colonial, and Keeneland. That shows a real versatility for a young horse to be able to handle 4 different turf courses, win all 4 times, go off as the favorite all 4 times. This is a pretty serious runner as well for North America if you're looking for that kind of American angle, if you like betting those American horses. Again, Mentee, and very nice horse as well. The 2 horses, though, I feel like we got to talk about are on the outside. And that's Shareholder and Whistlejacket. Now, they're not necessarily on the outside, but just alphabetically, they fall towards the back here. And Shareholder is one coming off a really poor performance last time out in France in a Group 1 to Whistlejacket. But before that, won the Norfolk at Royal Ascot and looked really good doing it. Won in debut as well. And it might not have liked the ground quite as much that last time out. A little softer, also going 6 furlongs. So maybe we cut back to 5 furlongs. We get firm ground. certainly a serious horse to consider. Whistle Jacket may end up being your favorite in this race for Aidan O'Brien. And this is a Coolmore horse and owned by Peter Brandt. And this one is pretty dominant. You'll look over, this horse doesn't run a lot of bad races. 6 for 7 in the exacta with 3 victories. 1-2 back in that Group 1. Did lose last time out, going 6 furlongs over soft ground at Newmarket in a Group 1 in the Juddmonte Middle Park. Now, that said, like I said, you're going to get firmer ground this time. You're cutting back to 5 furlongs. The horse has won a stakes race at 5 furlongs, going back to his time running at Curra earlier this spring, I should say. So this is a horse that, again, doesn't run bad races, is really dominant. It should be a lot of fun to see how these horses all stack up against each other in what should be a very contentious juvenile turf sprint. Well, let's go to the juvenile fillies. And this is an interesting one. Obviously, not quite as many international horses here, but I do think there's one that I really need to mention, which is American Bikini. This is a horse that actually beat the boys last time out over in Japan, going 7 furlongs. And this one has a lot of talent for Takashi Saito. And I'm a big fan of this horse. Now, there are some questions. This horse has to stretch out, sired by American Pharaoh out of a dam by Bernardini. Hello, do you like that pedigree? Because I certainly do. Should be able to take the distance. What I really like is the Bernardini mare. That's always Bernardini, love him as a broodmare sire. But it is going to be interesting to see whether or not this horse can stretch out, do the 2 turns. But love seeing that this horse beat the boys and now is going up against her own sex again, and I think is sitting on a potentially big effort. Now, the 2 American horses that I think you have to kind of start with are Non-Compliant and Immersive and Scottish Lassie. So probably those 3. So I'd say those 3 are top 3 choices. I think Non-Compliant might be Bob Baffert's best chance to get a win this whole weekend. Non-Compliant's a really nice horse, and I think is a horse that's sitting on some big efforts, and it should have continued talent going around 2 turns. Sired by Tiz the Law. If you watch my Bob Baffert preview, you know that I like that pedigree quite a bit. Had some trouble early on in the Oak Leaf, but recovered from that and was still able to get clear and win that race pretty easily under Juan Hernandez. I think this one has a lot of talent. Certainly is a pretty serious horse. Immersive, another serious horse. Won the Spinaway, won the Darley Alcibiades. 2-time Grade 1 winner. The only horse in the race that can claim that. So, and has handled the 2 turns. Done the mile on the 16th at the Alcibiades and was able to put away Quick Kick and was able to put away a horse like Quiet Side, who I have a high opinion of. This is a Godolphin bred for Brad Cox. Brad Cox wins about 26 to 27% of Breeders' Cup races during his career. Want to put that in perspective? That is 2.5 times more likely to win than Bill Mott, than Todd Pletcher, than Chad Brown. So, hello, Brad Cox wins a lot of races in these spots. So Immersive, really nice horse. Another one, Bernardini Broodmare, Bernardini Mare, I should say. Gap Year, sired by Nyquist. A lot to like there. And then Scottish Lassie. The McKinsey, who's had a great first crop. Jorge Abreu, first Grade 1, was that in the Frizette last time out. And that horse won by 9 lengths. Now, admittedly, there was a big scratch in that race. Senza Paroli, who was Chad Brown's monster, scratched out of that race with a minor injury, won't come back until next year. But Scottish Lassie just dominated that field and did it at 6-1 too. Wasn't even kind of the next closest favorite, and looked like she would be able to keep running forever the way she was going. So, she looks like she should absolutely be able to handle distance and keep going. Another one, again, very serious horse to consider in this spot. So those are kind of the 4 that I have my eye on between the Japanese runner and the 3 top Americans. Now let's head to the juvenile fillies turf. And again, we're going to have a lot of international entries here. And, it's going to be interesting. Aidan O'Brien has a lot of entries, bubbling, nice horse, coming off a Group 2 win last time out. And Shada for David Loughnane with his son Billy aboard. Won a Group 3 2-back, finished second, last time out, or finished, I'm sorry, further back last time out, to a next out winner going group 2 going a mile. So maybe there's some questions there. One thing I will say about bubbling for Aidan O'Brien, the horse is stretching out for the to 2 turns and to a mile for the first time, having only ever previously run at 7 furlongs. So, definitely a couple of questions there to answer. Destino de Oro. That's an interesting horse for Brad Cox. Stepped right up from being a maiden winner at Kentucky Downs to running third by a head in the Jessamine to Mayday Ready and Totally Justified. Those two are in this race. That's, you got to take those two seriously. So a lot of contenders in this race. This one feels very wide open, very spready in some ways. You have a Bill Mott horse like Scythian, who we saw win the Miss Grillo. But if you watch that race, the top 3 horses all took themselves out on the far turn because one of them blew the turn, and Scythian just kind of inherited the lead without ever having to earn it. Virgin Colada for Chad Brown made a big run to get up to second in that race. So that's another one to potentially look at there. But this one, again, is really wide open. And a lot of these horses, the U.S.-based horses, are trying 2 turns still for the first time. A lot of these horses are going to be stretching out. So that's why I do put a little bit more priority on a horse like Destino d'Oro, Mayday Ready, Scythian, Virgin Colada, because they've done the 2 turns. Obviously, another horse that is probably going to be your favorite is Lake Victoria for Aidan O'Brien. This one is undefeated, perfect 4 for 4, has never gone over 7 furlongs, but has also easily dispatched the competition every single time out, and has 2 Group 1 wins in addition to that, the Moyglare Stud and the John Monchevalry Park. So, again, a really tough horse to get by, has handled soft ground, has handled good ground. So, shows a lot of versatility, is going to likely be a pretty short price favorite in this field. And it's going to be interesting because I think if you think you can beat Lake Victoria, then I think this field really opens up in terms of where you might be able to get a price. But certainly she is a dominant filly among these 2-year-olds at this point. Well, let's move to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And Hill Road, top preference is to go to the Juvenile turf. So we'll see if he ends up running in this race or not. But you look at the other horses, you got a couple of Japanese entries in here in terms of Shin Believe and Akoro Azel. And you never want to take lightly any horse trained by Hideki Mori. Great trainer. And those two are interesting. We're going to get to those in a second. But I think this race kind of has to start with your top, maybe 3 in terms of saying Chancer McPatrick, East Avenue. Those are kind of the top 2. A lot of people would say, I think Jonathan's Way is a pretty serious horse for Phil Bauer. Gaming for Bob Baffert is a serious one. Ferocious could have a big comeback race here. I think you're talking 5-6 deep because I think Mackenzie Street's a nice horse for Tim Yakteen. And I even kind of like Dapper Moon for Dallas Stewart at a price. But and Citizen Bull is coming off a huge win for Baffert. So again, the Juvenile feels very competitive. This does not feel like a coronation to some extent. This does not feel like, this is a foregone conclusion who's going to win this race. This feels like a very competitive race. Now, that said, I could see people having a strong opinion one way or the other and singling in this race as well. Doesn't mean it's a spready race at all. Just because it's competitive doesn't mean you spread. So, I think you look at a Chancer McPatrick, horse is 3 for 3 with 2 grade 1s. However, his running style is antithetical to how things normally work at Del Mar. He's a deep closer over a track that always favors front-end speed. So can he overcome the track bias? Citizen Bull looked to be getting stronger and stronger every race that he's run for Bob Baffert. Son of Into Mischief has a really physically developed, particularly on his hind end. He is a nice-looking horse to watch run. He's one that could, appreciate this setup as well. Doesn't need the lead, but can go to the lead. I do have some questions on Citizen Bull, only that he carved out very modest fractions on the front end for Santa Anita standards last time out in that American Pharaoh. East Avenue for Brendan Walsh. This is probably my favorite horse in this race. If you watch my top 5 Breeders' Cup Juvenile contenders, he's number 1. And he just is so good. I mean, he looks so good. The Dam is a half to Cody's Wish, sired by Medaglia d'Oro. One of the things that is so impressive, obviously winning that Grade 1 Breeders' Futurity, doing the 2 turns in a mile and a 16th, so impressive. What I think was even more impressive was what Walsh talked about afterwards, and that was that this horse doesn't need to lead. This horse was training behind horses, seems to like kickback. So that tells me they have a plan B. In case the horse needs to rate, the horse can rate. That's important to note. Ferocious, listen, the horse hasn't really done much wrong. Had some trouble last time out in the Breeders' Futurity, got really jammed up going into that first turn, had to check up pretty severely, was inside, not comfortable, and was chasing lone speed in East Avenue. The race before that lost a shoe, and in the hopeful against Chancellor McPatrick, and kind of came alive late in that race and really put in a run. Obviously won impressively in debut up at Saratoga. So now the question is, well, where do we go from here? Which version of Ferocious is going to show up? He's a tough horse. And if he's trained, by all accounts, he's training well down in Kentucky, about to ship out to out to Del Mar. So he's one. Gaming, who won the Del Mar Futurity for Baffert, might be the best of the Baffert horses, actually. And remember, he beat Citizen Bull. He beat Getaway Car. He beat all the other Bafferts that are running. So he's a really good horse as well. And, beat a horse like Nooney also, who's in the sprint. So again, tough one there. Jonathan's Way, that's a horse I'd love to see what price I could get on Jonathan's Way. Low-key, I think he might be a very nice price in this race. Hasn't run since the Iroquois. Admittedly, that is usually not the strongest prep, but still. What impressed me so much was his debut at Saratoga. Encountered trouble early, circled the whole field 4 wide and pulled away like it was nothing. Next time out, he wires the field in the Iroquois. That shows me the horse has versatility, can overcome adversity, and he's done that in his first 2 races. That shows me a lot of mental maturity for a horse like that, to be able to do that. Sired by Vekoma. My only concern is the 2 turns. We haven't really seen the Vekomas take to the 2 turns yet. I'm just curious what type of sire he's going to end up being going around 2 turns and as his offspring stretch out. Now, Okoro Azel, the Japanese horse, won in debut, then lost in a stakes race next time out. And Shin Believe is just a maiden winner, but won impressively and going 1 mile and an 1/8. So has the distance. That's no problem. I think that's the one out of the 2 Japanese horses that I'm more interested in potentially looking at if you're going to go with any sort of a Japanese runner in this particular race. All right, well, let's close out Juvenile Friday with the Juvenile Turf. And this one, yowzers. You got a couple of monsters with Charlie Appleby, Al Quadra, obviously very nice horse, won well overseas and came in second of the summer. In the summer, I should say, the Grade 1 summer. But the horse that really impressed me is the horse that won that day, which is the Andrew Balding horse for New Century. New Century is a nice horse. New Century is a really interesting horse because the 2 losses the horse has were both to Al Quadra. And one was in debut and the other was in a stakes race. And the horse wins kind of an allowance, as they would call it, but basically a maiden race next time out in the second start, then wins the Stonehenge Stakes after being beaten by Al Quadra, then comes to the summer at Woodbine, and who's there waiting for? Al Quadra. What does he do? He manages to beat Al Quadra there. So that really impressed me, that the horse, was able to overcome that adversity of facing a common foe for now the 3rd time and finally now getting the win. Zulu Kingdom, obviously a very tough horse for Chad Brown, but one that I'll kind of be playing against. I'll be honest. Should have lost to Noble Confessor last time out. Should have lost to Tenacious Leader the time before that, in my opinion. I think both those horses, both Tenacious Leader and Noble Confessor, are better bets in this race than Zulu Kingdom. And that's because they both had some troubled trips and just didn't quite get in the clear, weren't able to kind of make their run the way they should have in some of those races. And I think those are two horses I would take very seriously. I was standing next to some assistant trainers for Noble Confessor when that horse finished second to Zulu Kingdom, and they both were very high. And immediately, right after that race, said, "Still think we're going to the Breeders' Cup with this one." This one, they're very high internally on this horse, and I think that one again, it's going to be very interesting to take a look at. Then you got a bunch of Aidan O'Brien horses in here. You got a horse like Henry Matisse, who Group 2 winner, two-time Group 2 winner, did lose against Group 1 company. Last time out, I'm going to give him a little bit of slack. It was over the soft ground at Longchamp. He did lose right before that to a very nice horse as well. Finished second that day as the beaten favorite by less than a length in another Group 1 at Curra, going 7 furlongs. I do think the horse should be able to easily handle going longer, side by Wooten Bassett. But that's the one. And last time out, lost to Camille Pissarro, who's absolutely outstanding. So again, just, that kind of A to B to C transitive property of looking at who these horses have run up against and who they've beaten, I think can tell you a lot. So again, this is a race, looks very tough on paper to see who's going to actually end up coming out. I actually kind of like I said, Tenacious Leader and a little bit out of this group. And I just think that's an interesting horse, Tenacious Leader. I'll just say that. I think that's a horse that could really come back and run a big race in this particular spot. So we'll see. And we'll see who ends up, drawing in if all of these international horses end up coming, etc. So could have some more horses getting in. All right. Well, let's get to Breeders' Cup Saturday. And we're going to have a lot more coverage for you of this, folks, throughout the week and next week. But let's talk about this sprint race. Interesting field. Bob Baffert has a horse in here, Pleasant, who's kind of only run against Allowance Company last time out at Los Al. Seems way in over her head. I don't know. Maybe that's a horse that was kind of a pre-entry just to kind of increase the field size a little bit. I don't know. We'll see. Because Frosted Dawn is probably not going to be in this race. So if that's the case, then yeah, it could end up being a rather short field. That said, it's a talented field. You have a horse like Scylla, the full to Tacitus, who is cutting back now for Bill Mott. Remember, that horse ran out at Del Mar going 2 turns against Adair Manor, finished second, and on 3 weeks rest came back to run in the Ballerina. So Mott doesn't do that very often, shows you how bullish he was. Now, this horse hasn't run since that race. I think Scylla could be sitting on a big effort. The horses that everybody's looking at, though, are going to be Society, Vava, and Ways and Means. Those are your top 3. Don't get anything twisted. And Ways and Means might end up being your favorite. She's 3, but my God, is she talented. What she did last time out was just so impressive. And since cutting back to that 1 turn, she's just looked like an absolute monster. The speed figures are huge. You have to assume she's going to be either your top choice or your second choice. Vava for Cherie DeVoe, always best at that 7 furlong distance. Did kind of come up a little short last time out, though, against Society. And I just wonder, Society is just such an interesting horse for Asmussen. I've always felt like I'm on the wrong side of that horse. There's no doubt that horse has talent. The question is, what type of trip does Society get? And does Society need the kind of perfect trip to win? Last time out, sat a perfect trip in that Ballerina, just tracking the pace of Money's Gold and then going to the top of the stretch and taking over, and was never really challenged in that way and just got the jump on the rest of the field. This will be a tough race. You got Zietlos, who's a nice horse as well, coming off a nice win. You got One Magic Philly, who's an interesting horse. Kirsten Bosch has some nice races to run back to. This is a really nice field for this filly and mare sprint. And then, oh, by the way, Soul of an Angel for Safi Joseph. That's one that almost beat Idiomatic a few races back. The Turf Sprint. What a race. What a race. This race is going to be about Kentucky Downs. Is it, though? No, probably not. But it is going to be interesting because since 2013, not a single horse that has prepped at Kentucky Downs for their final race before the Breeders' Cup has won a Breeders' Cup race. And what horse am I talking about that applies to? Your likely morning line favorite, Cogburn, who everybody has deemed as the fastest horse in the world and certainly has looked like an absolute freak since switching to the turf and has just never been challenged in so many ways since switching to the turf. But there is that Kentucky Downs stat that keeps rattling around in the back of my head. And it is going to be interesting to see. We're going a flat 5, and speed is the name of the game here. Bradsell for Archie Watson, that's a really good horse. Bradsell's a horse that I was high on last year, liked as a 2-year-old actually, but was high on last year, and maybe was a little disappointing last year. And it wasn't really anything that Bradsell did wrong. It wasn't he ran poorly ever, but all of a sudden this year really all came together and won the first 3 races and then lost last time out over soft ground at Longchamp and finished second that day. Finished ahead the last 3 times out of Believing, who's another very, very nice horse in this race. So Cogburn's got his hands full because here's the big thing. I'm not sure how good the horses are that Cogburn's been beating in the United States. And I think that's a fair question. How good is Arzak? I don't know. Arzak's a nice horse. Is Arzak a great horse? I don't know about that. I know Bradsell's a great horse. I know Believing's a really good horse. I think Starlust is a really good horse for Ralph Beckett. Star Mystery's a nice horse for Charlie Appleby. And anytime I get to go, Motorious for Phil D'Amato is always going to be a good day. And then you got Big Evs, which everybody's going to root for because, of course, Big Evs won that juvenile turf sprint last year, now coming back to run against Olders, and has had some success this year, has, I think, found it a little bit more challenging as the level of competition has gone up, but it's still a very serious horse here. And we know he can handle the ground in North America, no problem, and out in California, having won at Santa Anita last year. I don't think this is as much of a single and move on race as people assume. And if you're not singling Cogburn, then you're fading the Cogburn and you're spreading to a couple of other choices. Or maybe you're singling a horse like Bradsell. And maybe you just go, I think that horse is so good, it doesn't matter. And if so, use that race as a single, but maybe not on the obvious single in terms of Cogburn. So again, what a field. Excited for it. Even a horse like AG Bullet's a nice horse. Aesop's Fable's a nice horse. This is a really strong field for the turf sprint. And like I said, that's a stronger field by far than anything Cogburn's seen this year. So you throw Bradsell, Believing, Starlust, and Big Evs against Cogburn. Oof. Come on. As good as Cogburn is, and I love this horse. I really, really do. I find myself rooting for Cogburn because of how spectacular he's been since switching to the turf. But this is going to be quite a test in this race. All right, well, let's go to the distaff. And that is going to be a race where I think everybody's going to look at Torpedo Anna and they're going to look at Idiomatic. And they're going to say, which of these 2 horses are you singling? Because there's no other choice in this race. And I would largely agree with you. Idiomatic is an absolute monster when you stand next to her. She's huge. She's got a huge stride. She loves distance. She can run however you need her to run. She's got some versatility. Torpedo Anna, again, maybe the effort of the year, finishing second to Fierceness in that Travers. Coming back, maybe looking a little lesser in the Cotillion. But as I told people, if there was ever a race she was going to lose, it was that race. And she didn't lose it. And she probably should have won by more than she did. That was not an easy trip she had that day. And I would argue Brian Hernandez maybe let his foot off the gas a little bit there at the end, thinking he put away Gunsong, and Johnny V and Gunsong kept fighting on the inside to make it a little bit closer. But Torpedo Anna, she's a serious customer. What I would say is do not discount the Japanese horse Awesome Result. That is a very, very good horse. That horse is undefeated, is a perfect 7 for 7, and has largely won with ease, winning the Breeders' Gold Cup Grade 1 last time out, going 1.25 miles. This horse can get distance. This horse can go. And if there is going to be an upset in this race, it is absolutely going to be Awesome Result. Sired by Justify out of a deputy minister mare. Really like this one a lot. Really like this one a lot. I'm going to have to take a closer look and watch all the replays and do all. I mean, I've already watched most of them, but I'm going to have to kind of dig into some of the things more, look at the pace dynamic now that we know who the field is going to be. But there's a lot to like about Awesome Result in this field in particular. So I do think, obviously, Idiomatic, Torpedo Anna make a ton of sense. But like I said, if you're going to try to beat them, the Japanese horse, I think, is the way to go. Let's go to the turf. And another race where, wow, going to be interesting to see who ends up in this field. I say that because both Content, Emily Upjohn, and Wingspan all have this as their second choice. They would prefer to be in the filly and mare turf. So you could see some horses, you could see some movement in this race. I made a comment on social media. I'm not sure an American horse will get into the superfecta. Rebels Romance is a defending winner of this race. Luxembourg for Aidan O'Brien is a very serious horse. Shahryar probably should have won this race last year. You go back and look, Shahryar, the jockey on Shahryar kind of made a tactical error around the turn, and that horse still managed to finish third behind Augusta Rodin and up to the mark. Shahryar's a serious horse. Then you have Illinois, who I think is a really nice horse, Continuous, who's a great horse for Aidan O'Brien. And if any of those, if Content, if Emily Upjohn, if they run, obviously very serious considerations there. Farbridge for Christoph is, like I said, a really tough horse in this spot. Nice horse. Gold Phoenix, always been a nice horse as well for Phil D'Amato. Farbridge is probably the best chance for America to get on the board, but this would be one which would not shock me if it was 3 Europeans and a Japanese in the top 4 at all. And this is going to be a tough race for Americans. Now, I will say the mile looks a lot more conducive to American success, potentially. And that's going to be a loaded field. But this turf, man, the Euros are coming over, and they're serious in this spot. And as I've told you before, the Europeans do well in Southern California. Don't let this myth that somehow, I don't know if the European horses like the ground in Southern California. They like it just fine. They do great over here. And also their running style is not an issue as well. Something to note, there has not been a gate-to-wire winner of a Breeders' Cup turf route race at Del Mar yet. There's only been 20 of those. So admittedly, there are 10 of those there. So there haven't been that many. But there has not been a single turf route gate-to-wire winner at Del Mar in the 2 times it has been held there for the Breeders' Cup. Now let's talk about this filly and mare's turf. And this one, again, you see Emily Upjohn, you see Content, you see Wingspan in here. Soprano's a horse I really like for George Bohe. Full Count Felicia, a horse coming off just what a great win. Or at least I thought it was a great win. I love that effort because Kazushi Kimura just let the horse run and just got out there up there on the front end and said, let's go, and won that EP Taylor, which I just thought was awesome. Obviously, you have the Queen of Canada in Moira, having won the Beverly D, finished second in a really gutsy effort in the Diana, coming off a long layoff, was third in this race last year to Inspiral and Warm Heart, 2 absolute monsters, and didn't even have and even had a kind of a difficult trip. Did lose to Full Count Felicia, but again, that was a horse that just got loose in the lead and was able to kind of give the field the slip. So Moira, very serious horse. I know my good friend Ed DeRosa, he'll be betting this horse. He loves Moira. Couple of horses to mention. Warlike Goddess, obviously. I do wonder if Warlike Goddess's best days are behind her. That said, the 7-year-old has been lightly campaigned this year. I think you can draw a line through that Flower Bowl. That was such a weirdly run race with Idea Generation getting such an easy lead. And then you go to the Turf Classic and the Joe Hirsch, I should say, and losing to Farbridge, running against the boys, finishing second. I still think that's a really tough ask. And this one still, I think she's still got plenty in the tank. So she's, again, a pretty serious runner in this particular race. Now, the horse that I really like, and listen, we're going to talk about Dadia in a second, but the horse I really like is Cinderella's Dream for Charlie Appleby. I'm not sure kind of what happened to her after the Saratoga Oaks. I don't know if there was a minor setback or a minor injury, but she's been training pretty regularly, so I don't think there was. She was entered in that EP Taylor and opted not to run. And there's been rumors about her being in a couple of other races, and she never ended up running in them. Godolphin owned and bred. And I'll be honest, she was so impressive winning the Belmont Oaks Invitational and the Saratoga Oaks Invitational. And she'll be facing older for the first time. She's only ever faced 3-year-olds, but man, she looks the part. She is a serious runner and has an incredible closing kick and turn of foot. So she is a dominant horse when she gets going again, admittedly, against 3-year-olds. See how she does against older. She's beaten older, or she's beaten the boys before. Has never faced older competition before. So that'll be interesting to see with her. But Cinderella's Dream's a horse I really like a lot. And then Didia, what can you say about her that hasn't already been said? She's just a hard trying horse. The last 2 times out haven't been the best. 2 fourth place finishes. Relatively close in both, in the Maybe and as well as in the Diana. Has handled the course out there at Del Mar before. Ran last time out and was the beaten 3-5 favorite though in that race. Will be interesting to see how she bounces back from that. Ignacio Correas IV, I think, has handled her as beautifully as anybody could. So certainly another one to consider. Emily Upjohn, always been a big fan of this horse, and I think always been a very tough horse. One that I've always liked watching overseas, and has been running against her own sex now this year. Hasn't really gotten to the winner's circle this year at all, but man, a lot of back class there and I never at least discount John and Gosden horses ever. We'll see how good Hang the Moon is. That's an interesting horse. D'Amato really seems to have taken this horse to another level, winning the last 2 times out, 2 grade 2s and maybe in the Rodeo Drive. So maybe this horse is now kind of a new runner and could be an interesting horse to consider for CJ Thoroughbreds. So going to be a lot of fun to see Hang the Moon in this spot. And it could be a really, like I said, exciting day for, Kazushi Kimura to get that big win potentially on a horse like this. So that's another one. Got to see. And I always root for CJ Thoroughbreds as well, or at least I find myself doing that. But yeah, this is a good race. It is a real good race. And so, this is going to be tough. It's going to be a really tough race to take a look at. Let's go to the sprint there. And we're almost done. Just 2 more races. And in the sprint, you have, or 3 more, I should say. We got the mile, the dirt mile, and the sprint. In the sprint, this is not the same sort of sprint that you've seen the last couple of years with Elite Power and Gunite sort of a thing. Domestic product, second choice. This is not his first choice. Mufasa, also not his first choice. So those 2 are likely to go to the dirt mile. Okay, so yes, they're listed here as pre-entries, which they are, but they're unlikely to run. In my opinion, this race comes down to Ben Tornado and Straight No Chaser. Straight No Chaser, if that horse breaks, can run a hole in the wind, and 6 furlongs is perfect. Ben Tornado is a really tough horse for Jose. Got a lot more respect for just watching that horse continually run the last couple of times out. I think that horse could be sitting on a nice effort as well. It feels like a pretty open field, though, outside of that. Gun Pilot's a nice horse. Federal Judge is a nice horse. Dr. Venkman's a nice horse who's actually had some success even stretching out and going longer. Nakatomi's always been a hard-knocking horse, though might not win as much as I would like to see at that price. But the key out at Del Mar is speed and finding where that speed is going to come from, and that's where I find myself going towards a horse like Straight No Chaser. Now, if this race was held 6 months ago, a horse like Skelly would be really high on my list. Skelly, though, has had repeated issues breaking, lost last time out as well. I have more and more questions about a horse like Skelly, and I wonder what sort of price you're going to end up getting on that horse going into this race. But Ben Tornado, Straight No Chaser, those are the 2 horses that I'm probably most interested in this particular race. Then you go to the mile. Yowzers. What a field. What a frickin' field in this race. Carl Spackler, Chili Flag, Diego Velasquez, Fraden O'Brien, who's a freak, Geoglyph, who I've always liked over in Japan, Gino Romantica, who has always been a great horse, Henry Longfellow, love that horse, Johannes, or Johannes as they say, I always say Johannes, but Johannes for Yakteen might be the best turf miler in the country, certainly is the best turf miler on the West Coast, More Than Looks, for Cherie, who's a dominant horse as well, and a really nice looking horse. Mountain Bear, Notable Speech, and then when you think you go, how can it get any more loaded? Porto Fortuna shows up. Jeez, I'm criminatics. This horse is good. Porta Fortuna is just incredible at this distance. 3 wins this year, and all 3 Group 1 wins. Won the Coronation, won the Tattersall's Falmouth, and then won last time out in the Coolmore America Matron, I should say. This horse is special for Donica O'Brien. And this is just it's just such a deep race. This is a really hard race. This is feels like a spready race. Although, again, if you just go, hey, I think Porta Fortuna's the bee's knees, I think Porta Fortuna is the best horse in this race, then you just single Porta Fortuna and you move on. So maybe it's not a hard race, but man, this one is going to give handicappers fits. This is a deep race. Carl Spackler, everybody's favorite. But here's the thing. You know what Carl Spackler is going to try to do? Go to the front. As I said, no horses won at Del Mar in the Breeders' Cup, going 2 turns on the turf, doing it gate to wire. Something to keep in mind. Johannes has that big, deep kick for Tim Yakteen. That's a real nice horse. I found myself liking that horse more and more the more I watched that horse run. That horse just, come on, hasn't lost this year. 4 for 4. City of Hope, Ed Reed, Shoemaker Mile, American. It just wins all. And can go a little bit longer too. So it's not maxed out at a mile, but does seem like that's the best distance, 4 for 4 at a mile. And again, just seems to have developed beautifully out of the Sired by Nyquist. So again, this is a really tough field. This might be my favorite field, actually, to handicap. This might be my favorite race to look at. Let's finish things off with the dirt mile, which is the order that the races will be run. And there's a lot of asterisks here because Derma Sotogake, Senior Bruscador, and Skippy are all preferred in the Classic, so they're all going to run there. Dr. Venkman, we talked about in the Sprint, going to run there. So now the names that pop out are Domestic Product, Mufasa, National Treasure, Seize the Gray. Maybe Saudi Crown if you think that horse can bounce back. I wonder. I think traveling overseas took the starch out of that horse a little bit. Because I was really high on Saudi Crown at one point and thought he was a lock for the dirt mile. And he's just not really been the same since that Saudi Cup where he ran his ass off. Here's the thing. National Treasure hasn't worked out since the California Crown. I have serious questions whether or not this horse will be in the starting gate. Domestic Product. He can handle 2 turns. Is he best going around 2 turns, though? I think that's a legitimate question. Mufasa. Man, I like that horse a lot. I thought he looked so good in the Vosburg last time out. This horse can go long, has won going long before, is perfect at the mile distance. 10 for 13 winning. This horse likes to win. 1 in the slop going 7 furlongs, like I said, in that Vosburg. And I just think is like I said, pretty nice horse. And you could get a little bit of a price there because sometimes those Chilean horses get overlooked for Ignacio Correas IV. But this one's now 4th start in North America. And like I said, has handled a lot of different conditions in that time and absolutely can handle the distance. Now, Muth, I think is a great question mark. We'll see about Muth in terms of whether or not he is able to return to the form that he showed earlier in his 2- and 3-year-old year. Because that Shared Belief win was fine, but it wasn't really over much. Indispensable and Imagination are kind of okay horses. And then stepped up in the California Crown and finished somewhere up the track. Finished last by over 15 lengths. Now you're cutting back to a mile, so maybe that's the difference, right? Maybe that's the difference. Cut back to a mile and you're going to do all right. I think that is it's a big question for him. And that was a bad effort, but should be more fit, 3rd back from a long layoff, and we'll see. But I probably going to have to do it with somebody else's money because I don't think I'm going with Muth in this particular race. Post Time is a horse that it's fascinating to me for Brittany Russell, like to come from off the pace. If there's too much speed up front, that one is one that could potentially win. Saudi Crown, again, came back and won that Cowboy Jones race at Ellis Park. Probably didn't win it as convincingly as he should have. This is a horse that I always felt was just could be dominant at a 1 turn at kind of the mile distance. but does seem to have maybe lost a little off the luster. I do wonder if that Saudi Cup took a lot out of him, because that he ran a huge race that day and then came back with such a poor performance in the Godolphin Mile in Maidan, and then took a long layoff until that Cowboy Jones, and has been very carefully spotted by Brad Cox leading up to this race. And then the other horse you got to talk about is Seize the Gray, right? The Preakness winner, the Pennsylvania Derby winner, now going to the Dirt Mile, where he's probably going to just want to go straight to the lead and is going to just probably try to go as fast as he can for as long as he can, and certainly has the foundation to go longer, handle 2 turns. It's interesting. Interesting choice that he goes here rather than the Classic. I do think the 1.25 miles is probably a little distance limiting for him, based upon what we saw in a couple of other races. And so, particularly the Belmont. And so I do think that if he can get out and carve an easy lead, he's dangerous. The question is he going to be able to carve an easy lead? Would a horse like If National Treasure runs kind of go at him? Would Saudi Crown go at him? Would a horse, even maybe like a Mufasa kind of go at him a little bit? And I think those are legitimate questions to ask, whether some of these sprinters who are going a little, stretching out a little bit, would kind of go at Seize the Grace, not to let him get that easy lead. Domestic Product, though, man, if he can handle a 2-turn mile, is a tough horse in this race. He is going to be retired after the race, which I know some people like to fade that angle, so we will see. But this is going to be a fun one. I know my good friend Sarah Elbadwe is going to be previewing this race for us up here at NYRA and NYRA Bets. And I know that Sarah never picks chalk, so expect an unusual choice. I'm thinking Tumbarumba. That's my prediction of who Sarah's going to pick in this race. So there you go. Maybe post time. She has always liked post time. So anyway, now I'm just getting into predictions of who other people are going to pick in the race, which is always a fun little game that Sarah and I like to play. All right. Well, listen, folks, pre-entries are out. Past performances are going to be out Monday, Tuesday, because we got the draw on Monday. So Monday night, Tuesday morning, look for those. We got a lot of content here for you on NYRA Bets. We got trainer by trainer previews, historical analysis of how they've done it in the Breeders' Cup, how they've done at Del Mar, looking at their top contenders for this year. Those are already up, and they're more going to be on the way. We got horse by horse contender previews that are going to be coming up next week for your runners in the Breeders' Cup Classic. We're going to have not one, but 2 editions of Capping the Card next week. We're going to do a Capping the Card for Juvenile Friday. We're going to do Capping the Card for Classic Saturday. All right, we're going to do both. And we're just going to do the Breeders' Cup races, but we're going to do both, okay? So those are going to be 2 separate episodes. We got Keeneland for this weekend. We got Belmont at the Big A for this weekend. We got you covered, folks. So you want to make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel today. All right. My name is Matthew DeSantis, reminding you to have a great and prosperous day at the races. And let's just go and get excited, because guess what, folks? It's post time.